Hey everyone, it's Rebecca with Hands and Feet Homestead. Welcome back. It has been a while since I posted a video. We've had a lot going on with the end of the year wrap up in the garden, and then we were pretty sick. All of us got really sick for a couple weeks, and I have also been preparing for the birth of our third child. So with all that said, I haven't had a chance to really edit any videos, but as you can see, it's been snowing. We're in full-on winter now and enjoying the snow, but I still had a lot of footage I wanted to share with the end of the year garden wrap-up, some of the harvests that we got out of the garden, and then show you what we did to preserve some of those things. And so I hope you come along with us and enjoy seeing what we did with our garden harvest this year. So this is in early October, and I'm just harvesting the tomatillos that I have ready. We use tomatillos to make all of our green salsa, and if you've never grown it before, it is such an easy plant to grow. And I found this year that I let a lot of the ones that reseeded just grow. All the ones that were, looking the biggest and best, I just let them grow, and they ended up producing so many tomatillos. I don't think the ones that I started early did any better than the ones that had just reseeded itself. So I think in the future I'm just gonna not even worry about starting them early. I usually started them with my tomatoes, and I just don't think it's necessary with these, and that is a big plus, so I'm excited about that. So yeah, from now on I'm not gonna start any early. And if you've never grown them before, they put on a lot of fruit. So it was between 4 and 6 plants this year, and I ended up getting about 24 pints of salsa canned up, and I'll take you along as I can that up later in the video. But here we're just harvesting what peppers we have out there, and we'll use some of it for our salsa, and then I'll show you how we're going to preserve the rest of it later in this video as well. And these are ground cherries. If you've never grown them before, they look like little tomatillos. They're in like a little husk, and they're really sweet. They kind of have like a pineapple-y flavor to it. The kids really like these, and they love harvesting them and everything. And this is another one that I was so sad because I didn't start any early. I'm like, oh man, I'm not gonna have any, but they reseed itself all over the garden, and they grow like crazy. So this is another one that I'm not gonna have to start early again, and I'll just let it go and reseed itself. And here I'm just getting one last harvest off of my calendula flowers. Calendula can actually handle a light frost, but this was the last little harvest I did. I had been harvesting it all throughout the summer, and then I just go ahead and dry them, and then I infuse them in oil, and I use it to make salves, and I made a whole video on that. I'll link it below if you want to check that out, but I walk you through the process of making the oils and the salves. And I also have a recipe with printable instructions on my blog, handsandfeethomestead.com, and I'll link that below as well. So the next day I went out to take care of the celery that I had out there. This is really my first real go at growing celery from seed, and it went really well this year. I was so pleased with how it turned out. Some were a little bit on the smaller side, but most of them were really good sized stalks, and I just planted them along the eastern side of my tomato plants. I did that for 2 of the rows of my tomatoes, and they turned out really well. Celery is one of those ones that take a really long time in the garden. They can take like 120 days. So you start them from seed really early in the spring. You plant them out after your last frost. So we planted out in mid-May, towards the end of May, because they do not like a frost. They will die. They are a very tender plant. So, but they need a long growing season. And so I noticed that throughout the summer, we would try it, and it was so gross. It tasted so bitter, and I was like, oh man, this is nasty. But we left them in the garden, and then after it cooled down, the weather cooled down, and the frost got, not a frost, but a little chill got into the air, we tasted it again, and it was so sweet. It tasted so good. So just be patient with it. So I'll take you along and show you what I'm going to do with all of the celery. I mean, celery will last in your refrigerator for a week, a couple weeks probably, but obviously this is a lot of celery, so I need to do something else with it. So I decided that I'm going to dehydrate it, and the leaves I'm going to freeze because I make a lot of bone broth. We raise our own chickens here for meat, and we did about 85 meat chickens this year. And so I always keep the bones, and I make a batch of bone broth maybe once a week with whatever the chicken bones I had cooking. And so I love having celery leaves to just add into the pot. So it just adds flavor and a lot of nutrients, and it's a great way to not let all that go to waste because there's a lot of leaves on these things. So basically, after you're done chopping the celery, you want to go ahead and rinse off all the dirt and then blanch it. So just bring some water to a boil and submerge it in there for about 1 minute, and then you transfer it to an ice bath to stop the cooking process. So it's always recommended to blanch most of your vegetables before dehydrating it. Not all, but celery is one of those that you want to do it. It will retain its color, its flavor, and it will last longer in storage. So here I'm just loading up my dehydrator trays, just getting them all filled in, and I use my inserts that I have for my dehydrator because the holes were too big on the regular trays and they were falling through. So I recommend those if you have this dehydrator. I set the temperature for 135 degrees, and it took about 6 to 8 hours. After I got that dehydrating, I moved on to the celery leaves, and I ran into two thoughts about how to do that. Some people said that blanching it is a better thing to do before you stick it in the freezer, and other sources said that just putting it in the freezer raw was going to be fine. So I decided to do both, and so far after going through the process of blanching it, I decided that was kind of a pain, and I don't think it is really worth it. The blanching is supposed to make it last a little bit longer, so I plan to use my raw leaves from the freezer first and then use my blanched leaves later. It's been about 2 months now as I am recording this voiceover for this right now, and the raw leaves are totally still fine. I'm picking out of those when I make my bone broth, and haven't seen any issues with it degrading in quality yet. Regardless, I'm using it to add to bone broth, so I don't think it's a big deal. So I don't think I will be doing the blanching process again in the future, although it does take up less freezer space. So now it's the next morning, and my celery is all dehydrated. You can see how tiny the little pieces are, and it only took about 6 or 8 hours to get it completely dehydrated. So you want it completely dry and brittle, no moisture left in it at all. So I just go ahead and put it in a glass mason jar and store it on your pantry shelf like that, and you can add the dehydrated celery pieces to soups or casseroles and things like that. But what I decided to do is powder it. I put it in my blender and I got it into a nice fine powder, and that way I can just add scoops of it into any soups that I'm making. You can even add it into like chicken salad, anything you want, a nice celery flavor, and I just find that it's easier to use it that way. So now I'm on to dealing with my tomatillos. So there's a husk around the tomatillos, so you just need to peel those off, and then basically just give them a good rinse. Just put them on your baking sheets, and you want to roast them in the oven. It gives them a really nice flavor and gives it a really nice sweetness to it. And I just did it at 425, and it took about a half an hour. And you should roast them until they are really soft and just starting to brown. And then you can just pour them into your blender and just blend it on up. And then I ran out of time that day. I wasn't ready to make the whole batch of salsa and can it, so I just left it in my refrigerator for a few days. So Just keep that in mind. You can do things in stages. It doesn't all have to be in one shot. A couple days later, I came back to finish the salsa and get it canned, and I'll take you along with that. The canning recipe that I used is from a website that I will link below, but the original recipe comes from the all-new Ball Book of Canning and Preserving, so it is a tested and safe recipe. So again, I'll link that below so you can check out the full instructions. So I just started off by cutting up my onions, and one of the key things to getting a really good flavor in your salsa is roasting all your vegetables. So roasting the onions, garlic, and jalapenos. So you roast them in your oven at about 425 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes until they start getting a little bit charred. And then you can take the seeds out of your jalapenos if you want it to be a little bit more mild, or you can leave them in if you want a really spicy salsa. Basically, you just roast all the ingredients, blend it up in your blender, and then you can add your seasonings. There's just salt and pepper and a little bit of cumin in it, and the chopped cilantro, and of course your lime juice, which makes your salsa acidic enough to be safely water bath canned. In the instructions, it'll give you the exact amounts of everything, and then you just add all that into your tomatillos. The recipe called for 8 pounds, and I just so happened to harvest 8 pounds of tomatillos the other day, so it was perfect for this recipe, and I was so happy with how it turned out. I thought the flavor was really great, and I loved it so much that I ended up making a whole nother batch of it. I was able to go out and harvest more tomatillos right before we had our final frost of the year, and I got another 16 pounds of tomatillos. So I did another double batch of this recipe a few weeks later because I liked it so much. So so basically that's how you make the salsa, and then you just follow your canning instructions. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but you can read the instructions, and then of course read your ball canning book if you're new to canning, and just get the basics down. So in my water bath canner, I did 15 minutes just because of my elevation here. I always add another 5 minutes. I had almost 8 jars I got from that batch. I had one that wasn't quite full. So after I did the other 2 batches, I ended up with about 24 pint jars of tomatillo salsa, and I'm so excited about that. And again, as I said, that came from I can't remember if I had like 4 to 6 plants, and I got all that salsa. So I personally think that tomatillos are definitely the way to go when it comes to trying to get a lot of salsa from your garden over your standard red tomatoes. So we're moving on to our last and final preservation project for this video. I'm just going to take all of the peppers that I got from the garden. These are all hot peppers, and slice them up and put them on my dehydrator trays. Now, peppers are one of the vegetables that you do not need to blanch, so you can just go ahead and cut them up, put them on your dehydrator, and set it to 135 degrees, and it can take anywhere between 4 to 12 hours. It depends how big of slices that you are cutting your peppers into. So just set it for an amount of time, and then just go ahead and check it periodically just to see how it's doing. Once they were completely dry, I ended up powdering this as well, and my plan for this is to add to any salsas that add a little bit more spice to, or anything I'm cooking like chilies or tacos or something like that. So I thought that would be a fun way to use up the rest of the hot peppers I had from the garden this year. Well, that's it for this video. This was a part 1 of the end of the year wrap up for our garden, so be on the lookout for part 2 coming out, just to bring you up to speed on what we have going on. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found something interesting or learned something from this video. We thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the next video. Take care and God bless.